Recently, I found myself in the possession of 3 Pac-Man arcade cocktail cabinets. Why 3, you may ask? Well, because in the end, it'll be cheaper than buying one. Let me explain. I saw a listing on Clov for 2 cocktail Pac-Man machines for a decent price. After talking with the seller, he said he had a third one that he could sell at the same price, so I met up with him and bought all 3. But I did this for a very specific reason. I did some math, and I reasoned that if I could make enough profit off of fixing and reselling 2 of the machines, the third machine would be mine for basically free or close to it. So I took the plunge. All these are pretty much dead, but that means they went cheap. So let's take a look at these and see what we got. Connect to grounded outlet. Okay. I'm getting an image from the machine, but it's all garbage. The coin meter is also clicking away, which it's only supposed to do when the coin switch is activated. But at least that means the tube is working, so at worst, I have a way to test all the other boards. Machine number 2 is actually a Miss Pac-Man. I've got the paper underlay put away somewhere safe. The Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man are exactly the same on the inside, so it doesn't matter much tech-wise, but this one's probably been in a fire. This smoked plexi is pretty smoked. And the monitor is too. And just look at all this crap. So I'm not even going to plug this thing in until that monitor is completely rebuilt. Getting about the same result from the third machine as the first one, but once again that means the tube's working, so that's a positive result as far as I'm concerned. The first thing I do in any case like this is hit up Clov. Clov is a giant forum loaded with lots of arcade tech know-how, with minimal basement dwellers. Clov led me to mikesarcade.com. This website had a list of screenshots accompanied by repair advice for each one. Looking over the various screenshots, it seemed that my machines were suffering from both ROM and RAM problems. Right off the bat, I know I need to replace all of the ROMs and the RAM in all 3 machines. I'll also want to rebuild all 3 G07 monitors with a new flyback, some new resistors, and all new capacitors. Typically, I would also replace the power supply in each game, but Pac-Man machines actually use transformers to lower the incoming 120 volts. Then they regulate and rectify that voltage on the game board itself. So instead of a power supply, these boards will get new capacitors. Got my big old box of parts in the mail. Now it's time to get to work. First things first, I need to replace these fuse holders. They're super corroded and there's no use trying to troubleshoot if I already know I have power issues. When I'm working with big solder blobs like this, I typically add a new solder blob to it, and that makes it melt a lot faster. I removed those horrible old fuse holders and installed some brand new ones in their place. If you're going to do something like this, I highly recommend taking pictures of everything beforehand. It's hard to see in these conditions, but the wires on one side of the fuse holder are not the same color as the wires on the other side, and all the paperwork with the wiring diagrams on it is long gone, so I had to use the pictures I had taken. After all of that, I replaced the ROMs and RAM in 2 of the 3 boards. This alone got one of the boards up and running. However, this other board was giving me about the same problem that it did before. I tried swapping the ROMs and RAM between boards, but that didn't do anything. I also plugged a known working Miss Pac-Man Plus board into the cabinet, and that worked just fine. So the next suspects are the ROM and RAM sockets. From what I can see online, those typically go bad too. This is further evidenced by the fact that the sockets for the third board were so bad that they broke the legs off of the ROM chips when I tried to remove them. So in order to prevent problems in the future, I'm just going to replace all the ROM and RAM sockets on all 3 circuit boards. But since I've got one working right now, I'm going to just focus on cleaning these machines up since they're sitting right in the middle of my office and they're very nasty. Well, there's all my paperwork. Chuck E. Cheese used it to make a house. Here we go. Ew. Duh. That's just gonna fall. Wait, I got a trash can. Hold on. Here we go. It's gonna land in this trash can. There we go. It landed in the trash can. In case you were wondering how nasty the inside of this thing was, here you go. These leg levelers were really noisy and rough, so I replaced them with some nylon floor sliders. So now I need to take care of some cosmetic issues like this horribly flaking paint here. I would normally try to leave a machine as original as possible cosmetically, but this is just too rough. Plus I can get new paper underlays for less than 50 bucks. Since I don't hugely care about the glass being in mint condition, I decided to just remove the old paint and reuse the glass sheet. I soaked the paint in WD-40 and then gently scraped it off with a razor. I also needed to do something about these ugly lockdown bars, so I removed them, drilled out the holes a little more, and finally installed a carriage bolt in its place. This almost looks like it's supposed to be there, so it's definitely going to be my go-to method from here on out. At this point, I decided to jump the queue and put together the best machine to be the one that I kept for my collection. The Miss Pac-Man cabinet was in the best shape, smoke damage aside, so I'm going to swap the tube from one of the Pac-Man machines into this one, that way the burn-in will be consistent. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Don't do that. That was fun. I then went about rebuilding the G07 monitor, starting with removing the flyback transformer. That way I could lay the PCB down a little more easily. I replaced all of the capacitors and a few of the resistors that are known to go bad. Then I installed the new flyback. And while I was over here, I made up a new power cable to replace the ratty old one. I secured this to the inside with a tie down on the other side of a knot. That way the cable can't be yanked out. Time to start it up. Well, nothing's on fire. No, this is broken. This is beyond repair. Now I can just install this new underlay and secure the glass back down. It died. Well, I went through the rigmarole of swapping everything back and forth with the other machines, and eventually it ended up being the Z80 that was broken. I want to think that I had installed a brand new Z80 into this board, but at this point I've got so many duplicates of parts laying around that I can't tell for sure. All I know is, it didn't work then, and it works now. The last thing I did was lower this interlock switch here, so that it didn't turn off the machine when you open the door. Now I can use this switch as an easy access power switch. I was pretty satisfied with this repair, but after a while I began to notice that the monitor seemed pretty dim. It's hard to see on camera, but there's a noticeable dullness to the image, especially when compared to my Miss Pac-Man cocktail that's right next to it. So I took another look at Clove and found a post by Ken Layton saying that some particular resistors could be the culprit. So I took everything back out and replaced them. And while I'm here, I might as well replace these resistors too. They look terrible. And since there's 3 of them on the CRT neckboard, I can kind of assume that the RG and B signals will be flowing through all of these, so these could be playing a part as well. Lastly, I'm going to adjust the B+ on the monitor here. I've never actually done this before, but I've read that your image can be dim if your B+ is too low. So I've got my ground lead attached to the metal frame of the monitor, which is the monitor ground. The positive lead is going to this large white resistor here on the side facing the tube. getting about 110 volts. So I'm going to turn that up and try to get it to 120 or so. Well, that's as far as I can turn it, so let's see how it looks after all that. The image quality has improved noticeably. It's still not as sharp or bright as some of my other G07s, but that could be down to unique flaws with the tube itself, or it could simply mean that this monitor got a whole lot more use than the others. Regardless, I'm happy to finally have an original Pac-Man machine in my collection. Now, to the chagrin of the arcade collector purist weirdos, I'm going to be turning one of these cabinets into a multi-cade. A friend of mine asked for one, and I was able to find the parts to do this without damaging or modifying any of the original parts of the cabinet. This was an extremely easy process for anyone familiar with wiring at all, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. Basically, I installed new versions of everything except for the wooden cabinet and the coin door. What I would like to show you is a direct comparison of some of the games on this with my real arcade machines. That way you can get some sort of idea of how good or bad the emulation is. Right now, this video has something in common with all these old circuit boards, and that is, it's time for a recap. We started off with 3 complete arcade machine assemblies, 3 cabinets, 3 circuit boards, and 3 monitors. At the time, 2 of the monitors worked, but 1 was prone to catching on fire. And none of the circuit boards worked. After some light troubleshooting, I was able to get one of the circuit boards to work, so 1 complete assembly went to my personal collection. Shortly after that, one of the cabinets was sold as a multi-cade, so that's gone too. And the other working monitor was used in a Galaga project that I did recently. To update you on that monitor's condition, it continued to work just fine, until it died. Thankfully,
It was just a few!
And it continues to work to this day as I'm editing this video. So that leaves us with 2 dead circuit boards and the monitor that catches on fire. Now I've got a collection of vintage fire sprinkler equipment, so I'll be safe around this monitor. But since I'm intending to sell this machine too, I'd like to bulletproof it for the next owner. But for now, I'm going to turn my attention back to these 2 circuit boards. I just finished editing pretty much everything you've seen up to this point in the video. So now I've got to shoot and edit the ending of the video where I fix the 3rd Pac-Man machine. But I haven't looked at this thing in like 3 months. It's covered in dust and cat hair for some reason. So now I've got to get everything together and hopefully fix the last machine and finish the video. My goal here was to replace all of the ROM and RAM sockets on both of the remaining PCBs. However, this was far more difficult than I'd suspected it would be. I ended up accidentally lifting a ton of traces, which I had to jumper back together using this bowl of spaghetti. Unsurprisingly, this did not fix the board. But before I wasted any more time on it, I decided to try to re-socket the last PCB instead. This time I took things much slower, and I cut all the sockets in half. This way I could wiggle the sockets to be sure that all of the legs were free before removing it. And even though I rebuilt this board with all the typical new parts, I was still getting the same old ROM problem as before. But at this point, I'm nearing the end of my vacation time that I had set aside for working on these things. So I'm going to bail out and call this a part 1 of 2. In part 2, I'll go through the Pac-Man schematic and hopefully find the part that's not giving me the connection that I need, and then I can fix that and go from there. But until then, I'm over here looking at the Zoom recorder and it was just peaked the whole time.